Hello and good morning, everybody, and good evening to those abroad. We will be playing a quick video while we wait for the others to trickle in. So, Princia, if you want to proceed with the video. Sorry about that. It doesn't seem like the audio is working. Okay, sorry about that. The video had some issues with audio, but I guess we can go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our very first Farmer to Farmer knowledge sharing webinar hosted by Farmer to Farmer COCOS Philippines. It's an interesting time for all of us, and I hope all of you are staying safe and healthy during these times. My name is Michael Pascual, and I'm the recruiter for Grameen Foundation's Farmer to Farmer program and the moderator of today's event. Today, we will highlight the experience of Eric Dosberg, a global supply chain expert who designed a farmer profiling tool for our host partner, Ahon sa Hirap, Incorporated, a microfinance NGO, otherwise known as ASHI. Before we begin, a few housekeeping reminders. The duration of our session will be an hour, so please be mindful of the time since some of our participants are in different time zones. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat box and we will address them during the questions and answers portion of the webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to all participants. We are glad to have participants from the private sector, local and international NGOs, from the academe, and we're also glad to have Jay De Quiros from USAID Philippines. Our goals for the knowledge sharing webinar are to promote collaboration between stakeholders and volunteers toward the attainment of resilience within the coconut subsector, and to share first-hand knowledge and experience about the program and its benefits. We will be featuring one of our assignments focusing on farmer profile development. Our panel of speakers includes Judith Anuleto. She's an agriculturist and is the Farmer to Farmer country director. She will be presenting about our Farmer to Farmer COCOS program. We also have Jimmy Ramos. He's also an agriculturist and the head of operations for Ahon sa Hirap. He will be presenting about their experience as a host partner of Farmer to Farmer COCOS. Eric Dosberg will be sharing his firsthand knowledge and experience as a volunteer working directly with the staff of ASHI and its farmer clients. Eric is a mechanical engineer and brings a wealth of experience in the global supply chain and organizational development. Again, if you have any questions, please comment in the chat box and we'll try to address them during the question and answers portion of the webinar. With that, Judith, you may take it away.
Greetings, everyone. Good morning and good evening. So I'm talking to you about the Grameen Foundation. So Grameen Foundation is a global nonprofit whose mission is to enable the poor, especially women, to create a world without poverty and hunger. Founded in 1997, Grameen Foundation has historically worked with a network of microfinance institutions to extend credit to millions of the world's poorest poor. Our breakthroughs are digital financial services, digital innovation for agriculture, and also health financing access. We are present in various countries in Africa, America, and Asia, and we've been in the Philippines since 2010. Grameen has also responded to the crisis brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic in the Philippines through the unconditional cash transfer to low-income communities in Quezon and Aklan, and the COVID-19 relief supported by JP Morgan with
Okay, so it sounds like we've had some audio issues with Judith. So we'll go ahead. I'll go ahead and pick up where she left off. So we are present in various countries, including Africa, America, and Asia, and we've been in the Philippines since 2010. Um, we further, farmer to farmers. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Judith. Sorry.
sorry. Sorry, I was cut a bit there, so I'll continue. So the farmer to farmer further strengthens the service of Bankers Without Borders, or BWB. This is a Grameen Foundation initiative to create an efficient operational framework to mobilize, engage, and leverage the talent and skills of the private sector to help support both its own mission and the missions of other poverty-focused social enterprises. Next slide, please. F2F aims to generate sustainable, broad-based economic growth in the agricultural sector through voluntary technical assistance and cultural knowledge exchange. So volunteers use their skills and also their expertise to work with farmer associations, cooperatives, women's groups, agribusinesses, and educational institutions throughout Africa, Asia, Eastern Europe, Latin America, and the Middle East. This year, is its 35th year, and so we are celebrating its engagement with 19,200 volunteers, 12.5 globally. Next slide, please. So F2F COCOS in the Philippines is a 4-year program which aims to improve productivity, profitability of smallholder farmers and in the coconut, and by employing a total of 64 volunteers. Traditionally, each volunteer is engaged on an 18-day assignment, including their travel time. But, in the face of this COVID-19 pandemic, we are modifying how these assignments may be managed. And so one thing that we're doing now is to accommodate initial activities virtually while field deployments are suspended. Next slide, please. F2F focuses on coconut subsector because Philippines is the second largest producer of coconut products, yet 60% of its farmers live below the poverty line, and 30% of farmlands are in regions home to the largest number of rural poor. And so the constraints faced by smallholder farmers that F2F COCOS is trying to address are the lack of quality and actionable information and support, the lack of income diversification and market options, low resilience to disasters, and limited access to appropriate financial services. Next, please. So what F2F COCOS did is to partner with several organizations in order to address this in various regions of the country. Some upcoming assignments are on business planning, e-commerce improvement, financial risk evaluation, loan repayment evaluation, gender inclusion, marketing and promotion, quality and food safety, farm planning, and chocolate processing. And these are only examples of what assignments we are looking at. At the end of the program implementation, we target to have 25,600 beneficiaries, half of them female, and we are expecting that host organizations such as what we have today, Ahon sa Hirap Incorporated, whom will have increased or improved any of the following: their income, their products and services, production or natural resource management practices, and value in rural, agricultural, financial services. So thank you everyone for coming today, and I hope we are able to provide you with new insights from this webinar.
Okay, thank you, Judith, for sharing that and for sharing our program. One of the things we're implementing very soon are the virtual assignments. This is where the volunteer conducts virtual evaluations and trainings, and then eventual deployment. So we're hoping that eventually, when everything is okay in terms of travel, we'll be able to deploy these volunteers. So it's a challenging time with these restrictions, so we hope to maximize the time for virtual engagements as much as possible. We'll leave the floor to Jimmy Ramos, who'll be talking about the farmer-to-farmer experience through the host partner's perspective.
Good day, everyone. I am Jamie Ramos, and I am the head of the operations of ASHI. With my 24 years of work experience, I realized that the role of ASHI in the lives of the marginal families is not just to deliver its financial products, but also balancing with non-financial services in strengthening the socio-economic, cultural, and environmental awareness of its clients, or we call them as members. As a microfinance institution, we provide and deliver credit with a human face, giving equal opportunity and dignity that the poor families deserve. These aspects continue to inspire us in fulfilling our own personal mission in this development work. On behalf of ASHI, led by our President, Ms. Mercy Abad, and our Vice President, Ms. Trell Andres, I would like to thank Grameen Foundation and its Farmer-to-Farmer program in coming up with this very relevant project and an answer to our need as we improve our agricultural program in ASHI. Thanks also to Mr. Eric Dosberg for his amazing assistance to us. Let me share to you briefly about ASHI. Next slide, please. So ASHI has the distinction as being one of the early replicators of the Grameen Bank approach in providing credit for the bottom poor in the Philippines. Next slide, please. So tracing back its history way back in 1989 at the University of the Philippines in Los Baños, Laguna, as an action research project. After 2 years, the organization was formally registered under the Securities and Exchange Commission as a non-profit non-stock corporation in 1991. We call our members as nanays because they actively participate in the governance of the institution, and as a matter of fact, 3 seats in the board are occupied by our member representatives. In 2008, ASHI started this program focused on agriculture. We call it as ASHI Grameen Agricultural Program. Currently, we cover 2 regions in the Philippines, Calabarzon and Western Visayas, with 65 branches in 16 areas with around 600 plus staff. We have an outreach now at the level of 87,000 with more than 1 billion loan portfolio and a membership composed of 97% female and 3% male from the AGA program, maintaining an average loan portfolio of less than 5%. Actually, during the last reporting period, our portfolio traced before the pandemic last March was 2.5%, and our retention rate is at 97%. Next slide, please. So you can see on the screen the ASHI vision and mission statements and our core values. Next slide, please. With regards to ASHI's products and services, we have microloans, microsavings, and microinsurance. So we have 3 major classification of loans. We have the loans for micro enterprises, which include AGA financing. And we have also loans for education, for housing, for medical purposes, social protection, and even loans that supports our program for the environment, like clean water, solar products that bear zero interest. So we have also other non-financial services such as trainings, financial literacy, family welfare, alternative livelihood, and even programs for senior citizens and persons with disability, and of course, programs for the environment. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So why a coconut farmer profiling tool as our assignment with the F2F program? First, ASHI's current member profiling form contains only the general information about the member. And the profiling tool for AGAP is designed for major crops such as rice, corn, and vegetables. With the profile database for coconut, this will help us understand the specific needs of the members so that we can also tailor fit the products and services or assistance to the cocoa sector. And of course, the expertise of the volunteer, Mr. Eric Dasberg, helps us come up with a tool that is specifically useful for the cocoa growers. And of course, understanding the dynamics of the cocoa industry in our areas of operation. Next slide, please. With regards to the impact of the farmer-to-farmer program, for ASHI, you're able to identify our internal capacities and what to source out externally to support the sector. Once we were able to finish this part one of this project, so we will already know if we need the assistance of our agriculture office, other agencies, and departments that can help us to enhance our programs with the farmers. And of course, designing and implementing appropriate products and services and support programs specifically for the sector. Improve the quality of membership, because we have observed that most of the loans of the members are not invested much on the resources that they have, which eventually cause them to perform not so well within their, especially in the compliance of the repayment and even their attendance during meetings. So after a year, the performance is decreasing. So this project will enable us to improve the quality of this membership and eventually increase our loan portfolio and prevent the potential risk. On the part of the members, they will be able to acquire new information and learning to better understand their livelihood as we go on with the engagement, ensure proper utilization of loan, and eventually improve the business and improve the quality of life of their family. And with a good performance, later on, they will maintain the good relationship among them in the group and in the center as well. Next slide, please. With the immediate steps and plans after the assignment of the volunteer, we're able to formalize the creation of a team composed of the operations and the member and even the monitoring and evaluation department. So we formalized it right after the weeks of stay of the volunteer last February. And we scheduled 3 workshops in different regions, but unfortunately, we only did one because of the pandemic. So we hope we can still catch up, no? And we will innovate. How do we handle this, no, before the end of the year? So even though we have only finished one workshop, but we were able to make minor refinements already on the tool, and we were able to translate it into the local language, which is Tagalog. So we were also able to identify the first set of the region that we had the workshop. We identified already the targets per branch. And we have issued general guide on what to do before, during, and after the survey. we decided also to use paper-based form for the initial rollout so that the staff would have the feel and can take down notes as they go on with the interview. But eventually, we will use the tablets we'll incorporate the tool within the tablet, which our field staff are currently using as of this time, even with their meetings with the members. And we also scheduled the second part of this project, which is market research, but it was canceled also because of the crisis that we faced. And we targeted that the consolidation of output should be on July and the presentation of the final results so that we can decide already and refine the products and services and the possibility to adopt the clustering of farmers, which we now have the experience in with our farmers in Laguna. So we have the successful implementation of the clustering approach. So we will adopt it with the COCOS sector. And also the piloting of this newly designed products or service by October or December and roll it out by 2021. So to catch up with this project, we'll maximize use of technology through virtual engagement to assist the members' recovery. So as we go back to the operations of the branch, now we are reaching our clients through virtual meetings, through the messenger or SMS to check their situation and what are their needs. So we will incorporate this project with the mechanisms that we are doing now with our members. And of course, the ongoing coordination with the Grameen Foundation team, especially on the second part of this project. Next slide, please. With regards to the management of the assignment, the steps that we did was to identify first the most appropriate area for the assignment and the advanced information and preparation of the branches involved, including the orientation and feedbacking with the branch staff and the involvement of the monitoring and evaluation where the research and development unit is housed was very helpful in coming up with the output. So we were fortunate also that Mr. Eric was able to share the output and feedbacking during the operations team meeting last February with the management team and the operations team. And of course, the success of the assignment also it was because of the close coordination and collaboration with the Grameen Foundation facilitators, especially with Judith and Michael. Next, please. Next slide, please. So, describing the day with the volunteers. So, the entire process really during the time that Sir Eric arrived in our Unisan branch, he has the complete understanding of the whole of the operations, including the transactions within the MIS, so that we, especially on what information can be derived from the existing records that we have, including also observation of the entire field processes in group formation, center meeting, loan evaluation, and even member monitoring. And of course, the sharing of experiences with the staff during dinner time. And one of the significant learning that we had was on the use of geotagging in order to validate the information without even going to the field or to the area or to the farm of the farmer. I hope Sir Eric will elaborate this part further. With regards to the challenges and lessons learned, ensuring the volunteer safety was very important for us. So we are mindful about the safety and security of the volunteer. That's why we were able to have the courtesy meeting with the municipal mayor and even reaching out the local officials in the barangay with regards to the volunteer assignment. And we find it important someone to translate the questions and conversation into the local language so that the members will understand and we can get quality information. describing the overall engagement with the farmer-to-farmer program. So everything went smoothly, coordination was very good, and Sir Eric's output was excellent. So once again, thank you to Grameen Foundation for this amazing project. So I think that's all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jimmy, for sharing that. And I hope that gives the participants an idea of how the project would go from I guess, the lens of the host partner. And it was a very smooth process for us on our end too, working with you, Jimmy, and your team. And we really appreciate everything that we did, or we had a chance to work with on. Our next presenter is, of course, Eric Dosberg. He is one of he's our second volunteer that we've had through the program, and we're delighted to have him today. So Eric, if you want to go on.
Great, thank you very much, Michael. Thanks for the introduction. I'd like to first, well, here's the background of me. I'll certainly, while I'm talking, I'll leave this up there. Don't need to, this is the least important slide within this whole deck right here. But I'd like to mirror what Jimmy was saying in terms of the collaboration up front and how well things were coordinated. I think that was one of the key success factors from my perspective in this project to date, was that thanks to the Grameen Foundation for arranging things right from the very beginning when I was selected as a volunteer. We started to work right away, and there was a lot of collaboration and pre-work done before I ever got to the Philippines. And I think that was really key. There was very clear, the clarity of what the objectives were, the intention and the deliverables were understood right up front. And then the commitment by the ASHI team to dedicate real resources. Jimmy in particular spent a significant amount of time in advance before I arrived. And then while I was in country, the commitment there set a very strong message to the organization. And then he followed that up with dedicating resources to accompany me in all the field visits, not just the local staff in the Unasan branch, but Ron from their data analytics department accompanied me for the whole time. So I think those are some very key critical things about how you prepare for the project and execute effectively. So I'd like to thank the Grameen Foundation, and certainly Jimmy and the entire ASHI team, in particular the Unasan branch, for all the support they gave me while I was in country and in advance. And to be honest, since that conversation has continued since I returned to the US. Next slide, please. So the project objectives were very clearly identified before I arrived in country, and we spent a significant amount of time between myself, the Grameen Foundation staff, as well as ASHI, to go through this and take them from what the words were to what that meant in action and intent. And like I said, that to me is one of the critical success factors. There was no ambiguity at any time in the project for me of what was expected of me. And then what I expected to be able to deliver. And I think that was, first of all, energizing for me. But second of all, it just put everything in alignment of how things were going to operate right from the very beginning. So I think that is really key. When we looked at it, we talked, Jimmy referenced that, the major intent was to create a survey tool. And then when I was in country, we were going to pilot that survey tool. So why is it important to have a coconut farmer survey tool? Judith touched on it a bit, Jimmy did as well, but how I took it is, this was the opportunity for telling the story of the coconut farmer in the Philippines. This is one of the early projects of a larger project, and this was our opportunity to build a very robust and living database about what it looks like to be a coconut farmer, and it will give a very good view of what that is across the entire ASHI network, which is very extensive within the Philippines. So the tool was meant as the very entry point into that engagement with ASHI and their members who are coconut farmers. And then subsequent volunteers will be able to leverage that to turn it into market study, turn it into action, and ASHI will be able to then tailor products around it. So I think it's very key that, you know, all these projects are aligned around a very strong foundation of data and a means to continually grow that. And one of the things I think that really came clear to me while I was in country is that because of the ASHI network, they're really positioned to become the de facto expert within the coconut industry, because it's very fragmented. It's very difficult to really get good data about what really happens within the coconut supply chain. There's elements that are clear, but not in aggregate. And I think ASHI, with this approach, will become a known expert in this space. So in advance of arriving in the Philippines, I did create a profiling survey tool, did a lot of research with discussions with ASHI, as well as consulting with research universities here in the US about agricultural practices and things they've done in developing markets, and then applied that to the profile tool. My background is in supply chain and operations, but it's not in the coconut sector. I come out of the electronics supply chain. So, and as Jimmy and Michael said, my background is in engineering. So I took a very supply chain or value chain approach, an engineering approach of saying, identifying where value is created within the overall supply chain, and then structured the survey tool to how do we get the data that will help us understand where that lies within the Philippine context. In addition to that, I also helped design a database framework so that all that data that could be collected had a very solid home to reside. And the key is that from my past experience, you need to make sure that data is transparent, accessible, should be in systems that are already being used, because if they're in separate systems, they quickly become detached and stale very quickly. So I wanted to make sure we understood the ASHI network and how we could feed that information into theirs and leverage it very much appropriately. And then looking at how we brought that, once we had all the data and we had it in a place where we could use it, what was the tools to use the data aggregation to turn it from data points to a data set and ultimately to information. And there's a couple highlights here around what you could do, extract from that in terms of the entire coconut farming base in the Philippines based on that. So next slide, please. So that kind of tells the setup. Then it was the field work that we executed here in Unasan, the town of Unasan in the Quezon province branch. And we really had kind of four main steps that we performed in the field work as the pilot of this survey. So, you know, when I arrived, as Jimmy said, I spent a couple days when I arrived in the Philippines first with the headquarters staff of ASHI to understand how they coordinated and managed all their branches and how information flowed and decision making was made at the headquarters level. And then when I traveled and spent a week and a half in the field in the Unasan branch, I spent the first couple of days not with the coconut farmers, but with their typical ASHI members, and went to several meetings across several different groups to understand how the dynamics worked within the membership teams. And they showed me a very broad range of the different groups, some that were more established, very high performing, very strong member leadership and participation, to some very young or non-performing. So I could understand the dynamics and how the field officers manage that. And that was very important because, again, this is meant to augment what all the really good work ASHI is doing and extending it into the coconut farming base, not create a new path or channel. Then we conducted field visits to the members that were in the coconut farming sector. We arranged originally for 15 interviews. We actually executed 12. There was maybe we were a little over optimistic on the number we could do based on the geographic distances we had to travel. A lot of these are very remote, so you had to hike into where the farmers were operating. And we didn't want to cut short interviews just to keep on a time schedule, because once you started the pilot, started the survey, we wanted to make sure we captured the full survey, the most data we could collect in that context. So we did fall a little short of the initial data set that we wanted to, but I think the quality of the data set was very strong. And that's how we field tested then each day. So what we would do is we would conduct 2 to 4 interviews per day. And then we would come back to the Unisan office. And there's the one thing about the ASHI Unisan or the ASHI branch offices is a very communal dynamic there. The field officers are all very young, very passionate. And so in the evening, there was a good chance of learning best practices and feedback sharing, either around the dinner table or in the informal conversations. What we did was then each day refine the tool based on the results or the process during the day. So each day we made the tool a little better, and we tested new things, different strategies of how can we get information from the members very efficiently. And so as an iterative method each day. And I felt very comfortable that through the 12 interviews that from the first to the last, we made significant improvements in the questions we were asking, how we were asking them, how we were collecting, and just overall time management of the process. The fourth piece was, as Jimmy mentioned, is that at the end of my stay in Unisan, we actually brought all the managers from the other branches to the Unisan branch, and we did a day-long training and initial output of the experiences in the field, in the pilot. Next slide, please. So looking at the survey tool itself, we structured around 5 key elements. And as I said before, what we really were trying to do is capture the story of the coconut farmer in a very structured manner, so that we could translate that story into data that could be aggregated and analyzed. And it came around 5 key data categories. One is the farmer themselves, their personal profile and the socioeconomics of that farmer. Now, some of this we already had because of ASHI's database on its members, but it was very at a high level, and we wanted to drill down that to around what that really meant of the family unit, who participated in the farming activities, what were the needs, resources around it. And so we started that socioeconomics. Then we moved to agricultural and cultivation, how they operated their farm. Then we took the next step in looking at market access and supply chain, how they took their product to market and what did that market look like. And then we looked at what were the financial or needs or service needs around the farmer, what was inhibiting them or preventing them from doing things they wanted or expanding around that financial needs. And then the last one was much more unstructured. We wanted to be able to give the conversation more depth, and we needed to make sure we provide an opportunity not just to have the conversation, but really that talk about and show what they actually did. And this often we did while walking around in their farm. The first 4 areas we kind of did in a central location, sitting down and talking. The last piece we would kind of go through, walk around their farm. They could point out around things that around their farm, tools they used, the trees they had, all those kind of things, and access to water, where their well was, how far was it, and all those kind of things. And just as a note, most of these all the farms we met at were either from about 0.5 hectares up to 5 hectares in size. So very small leaseholding farms. But that was very important. And a lot of things came out of just walking around the farm and talking about and seeing, really getting assessment of how the farm was operating, and it didn't match what we were hearing. The last piece over on the right here is that we also armed the field officers that trained them about geotagging, that a lot of data can be gleaned about each farmer just by knowing where they were, getting their geographic location, their longitude and latitude. So what we would do, we trained everyone using their mobile phones that they're all carrying, how we could capture where the farm was And that way we could build a very large network of understanding how the members' proximity to markets, what their terrain looked like, what their, there's a lot of free satellite imagery. Once you know a longitude and latitude point, you can see what's going on about that farm. Canopy, you can look at the health of the trees. And so that gave another depth of knowledge that the farmers don't need to provide. All we need to know is the location, and we can layer that on top of the formal survey data to make a much more three-dimensional data set about each farmer, and then in aggregate the entire network. It's our intent that when this survey tool is fully rolled out, that we will have a huge several thousand point database with geographic locations of each of those farms, and the ASHI staff and headquarters will be able to look at that, centralize, and look at their entire network and understand how that works. And I think that was a very interesting, all the farmers as well as the staff really felt interested in that element of the study. Next slide, please. So I'll hit on a couple of these. There's several slides here, and we actually really got a lot of good initial findings from the survey, and I'm going to hit on a couple of them so we can have time for question and answers. But the couple key core ones were that most of the farmers treated the trees as a natural resource that was kind of there, but they weren't active farmers in the sense of there was no very little fertilization, no irrigation. It was all about what do the trees produce on their own, and how do we harvest them. There was really not any activity of how can we make yields better, how can we be more proactive about replacement of trees when they're end of life. It was very much like I said, a caretaker approach versus an active managed crop that you see in most things. There is also intercropping is occurring, which has a lot of benefits in terms of managing crops and also providing alternative revenue streams, but it's not very systematic. Different people was kind of, ad hoc, or sometimes mostly just for their own consumption. And so there's a real opportunity to be very proactive about intercropping there, and that's going to take training. The other piece is that almost every farmer that we surveyed is selling mature dehusked nuts, which is absolutely the lowest value added product within the coconut supply chain. And so the value that they're able to capture is very low in the market. And even the one process they're doing to dehusk, that most of those husks are being wasted because they don't have market access to where people want those. There is a global demand for that, but they don't have the channels to access them. So it's being wasted. Next slide, please. One of the really heartbreaking results of the survey was that, while the coconut farmers are already in a very stressed position within their economic situation, the 2020 outlook for their harvest is very poor. The area in the Unasan in particular was hard hit by typhoon in December 2019, high heat, irregular rainfall, and this is all pre-COVID-19. So they don't expect a very big crop. The banana, where people did have intercropping with bananas, those were all wiped out by the typhoon. And where people also raise pigs, they're being damaged by the swine flu epidemic in the area. And like I said, this was all pre-COVID-19. So it was already a very stressed community within the coconut sector. To add on to that, the markets for their pricing, the market pricing for their products was very volatile and very low. Like I said, it was really challenging to see how economically they could maintain viability based on their current practices and market conditions. Also, and this was one of the findings, is that I recommended doing more work of going up into the supply chain, into the buyer channel, the middleman market, because that is also highly fragmented, disaggregated, and most farmers are only using a single buyer. So they really aren't getting very good market pricing or connections into the markets for their full products. It's only what that middleman decides to have a market for. And most of those do not have economies of scale to really reach broader markets as well. Next slide, please. There was also very clear that, all the farmers said that, they don't have good access to farming best practices, not a lot of sharing. They are remotely spread out, so there's not a lot of ability there. And so there's an opportunity for training and best practice sharing. And that's why the geotagging and looking at the complete network and aggregate will help then be able to target how that kind of training or focus can be done. They also talked about financial capital needs, and this is one that ties into the supply chain. A lot of the farmers didn't have the basic capital to provide basic tools for harvesting or dehusking. And in those instances, they relied on their buyer for those, which came at a cost of that. Then they were obligated to sell to that buyer, and they couldn't really go to market. So having access to working capital that give them basic tools would give them greater freedom to their supply chain. Next slide, please. So there was a lot of training that was identified. Here's a list of just a couple of them, of the kind of the highest ones. But you can see there's a huge opportunity. And as Jimmy talked about, some of the services the non-financial services ASHI provides is in that training side. They focus very heavily on the financial management and financial education. And I think there's an opportunity here to extend into the training on, harvesting, agricultural practices, value-added operations, larger market access to unlock more value for the farmers. Next slide, please. So from my standpoint, kind of wrapping up my experience, a couple things, why did I take on this project? First of all, it was intellectually intriguing. As I said, I've been in the supply chain field for a long time, but it's always been in the electronic space, very global. And so I like the aspect of the global nature of it, but in a sector that I was not familiar with. And I think it's very important that we always challenge ourselves, but bringing someone in who might not be the industry expert but knows the process to ask the right questions to get to the right understanding and value can be important, because I literally had to educate myself, and had to ask, why do you do it that way? And because I didn't know. And sometimes if you have the pure expert, they assume too much. So having a level of, in my case, a level of ignorance forced me to ask the questions for me to understand. And also, the other reason why is that, I feel very committed to the global supply chain. I think, unfortunately, these days we're kind of trying to disaggregate the global supply chain, where I feel there's huge value for people to work together across the globe. And so this was my opportunity to participate in that. Preparation was key, as I highlighted earlier, and I think Grameen and ASHI did a wonderful job in preparing me to hit the ground and maximize my time in country. And that was my intent is, I had 18 days there, and I wanted to make sure that we leveraged every minute of those 18 days. And that all happened because of advanced preparation on the part of the team. The impact of me and my community is, I've had a chance to explore, coconut products are all throughout our consumer products here in the US, but people don't understand that connection back to the farmer. And so that gave me a perspective that I could then talk about. And on me personally, it was very, rewarding to learn new things, get to see people who are really passionate at work with the ASHI team, and just experience that with them. On the challenges side, I'll be honest, other than seeing the dire conditions of many of the ASHI members in the coconut sector in particular, I really didn't feel we faced any challenges logistically, organizationally, or project execution. And I really attribute that to the team of the Grameen Foundation and ASHI. ASHI took this project extremely serious, and they dedicated significant resources to support me. And that to me is a best practice, is that at every project going forward, you need to make sure that sponsoring organization takes it seriously and puts the resources behind it. Someone like Jimmy at the senior level of management that committed the time he did sent a very strong message to the rest of the ASHI organization as well as the members in the field. So I think that is, I cannot stress that part of enough. The lessons learned, I touched on some of those certainly before, but I think it really just goes back to what I just highlighted with that engagement and participation and proactive work. And for me, what's next is I look forward to seeing the ASHI team. Unfortunately, we took a setback because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but I really do believe they're positioned to be to lead expertise in the Philippines coconut industry, have the means to execute it, have a good roadmap and a commitment to do it. For me personally, my commitment has been that coming back from this, it had been a while since I'd done a project like this, and it really energized me. And I want to be able to structure my professional career so that I can do a project like this once a year, as long as I can. From the overall engagement summary, the 3 words I would use to describe it was what I just said: energized. I came back and I'm still as energized when I left the Philippines about the project and what it gave me, and seeing the work that the ASHI team does. Sometimes in the world we face pandemics and strife here in the US, but seeing good people, passionate people doing great work, always touches you and looks at the positive. So sometimes you need that, and I certainly did, and I dwell on it pretty much daily. Resilient is the other, and that's reflecting on the farmers and the ASHI team members, because that really, it was see all the challenges they face, and the smile on their face and the work that they do is very rewarding, and I can't think of a better word than resilient of them. And then perspective, as I said, knowing what's at the other end of that supply chain in anything that has a coconut product, and tying that to individual, and knowing what their life is like brings richness to life. So thank you again to the Grameen Foundation and ASHI for providing me with the opportunity to hopefully contribute a very little piece of this overall project. And I look forward to seeing very solid results as you continue to roll this out.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric, for sharing your perspective and your experience with us. And we hope the audience was able to gain some valuable insight, and hopefully provide additional energy and motivation to participate in volunteer efforts like this. So it sounds like ASHI's well on its way in strengthening its farmer profile data, and how it will help better understand the stories of and needs of the ASHI clients. And the technology Eric introduced with geotagging is very exciting, and we're eager to see how this develops. We also look forward to the second assignment, focusing on market research and development with our next volunteer. 2 weeks doesn't seem like much time, but we really appreciate working with Eric and Jimmy and the ASHI team on the preparation and the efforts before and after deployment. And we're also glad about the continuous communication between the volunteer and the host organization even now. Our hope also is for volunteers to have the opportunity to be immersed in the culture of the Philippines, so to be able to experience the food, the community, and the scenery. I believe Eric was able to enjoy a little bit of that during his time. So
I did. It was wonderful, beautiful, and wonderful.
Awesome. Well, we hope you get a chance to come back. So we have, looks like we have a couple more minutes. We hope we were able to answer some of the questions submitted on the registration forms. And then for any other questions, we hope to address those maybe in future webinars. For now, we'll go on to some of the questions addressed in the chat box. It looks like we have a few questions here. The first is from Nancy Wells. Were there any downsides for the farmers in sharing the GIS data, or limitations in what they wanted to share, imagined or real world or real downsides. Eric, is that something
Sure.
that you?
Sure, and that is something, and it's you hit on a very key topic. You know, data privacy is a real and evolving topic, and it's one that I still I underestimate. You know, especially in talking with the ASHI staff, who are all very young in Unisan. You know, it's I've come out of the electronics world, and I know how kind of all the data structure side of connected devices work. So it's always surprising when people don't understand what digital footprint you leave when you use all the free apps and your mobile phone for taking pictures. And that was one of the first things I did, was kind of teach them that you're already doing this. Every time you take a picture with your mobile phone, it is geotagged in your metadata. And that can be shared. Sometimes it is without you knowing it. Other times, you know, you're voluntarily sharing that. So I think it's a good topic. I don't have the good answer for that. We certainly were very clear and asked for permission and explained what we were doing. And I would say none of the farmers voiced concern. But you're absolutely right. You know, having all that location data in the wrong hands can be an issue. And I think in talking with the ASHI team, you know, talking about having that confidentiality of data, whether it's geotag data or any of the other data we collect, is important. But none of the farmers raised it. They were very open. They were, you know, all of them were very eager for help. And so maybe they were more open to that because they felt they're in a very challenging position. But I do think that's something that we do need to monitor and make sure we're very transparent about use. And that's the best thing, is very clear. Why are we doing it? How is it being used? It's not being shared to others. If there's any concern or pushback, certainly then how do you eliminate that data so that farmers do not feel exploited in that process? But that's probably the best answer I have. It's an evolving one. Everyone's challenged with it. I always say, I remember in 2000 at the dot-com burst, there was a speaker I went to, and they said, if the product is free, you're the product. And every single one of us are using digital devices. Absolutely, that data is going to someone and it is being used. In this case, we're just being very proactive and transparent in what we're doing.
Great, thank you so much, Eric, for that answer. We'll try to answer at least one or two more questions because it does look like we hit our mark, but we'll try to answer one more.
I apologize, I went long.
It's all good. It's all good. We'll take another question from Radhika. I think this is for Jimmy. Is there an opportunity for the farmers to organize or coordinate efforts to increase their negotiation power? Jimmy,
yes, it's very possible. Yes, it's very possible because for 2 years now, we have an experience in one of our association that is supported, the clustering approach for marginal farmers and vegetable growers. So we'll look into the adopting it also with the COCOS sector.
Great, thank you so much, Jimmy. And we'll address one more. This is another one from Nancy. Are there opportunities at Grameen for volunteers to Zoom and discuss their experiences, since she would like to participate in lessons learned discussion? Judith, do you want to answer that? Judith, maybe you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. It's raining hard on my part of the world now. Anyway, thank you, Nancy, for this very interesting idea. We're open to conduct such sessions, and for sure we will get in touch with interested persons. And yeah, today is a manifestation really that there's a wealth of information around us, and we'll be happy to share them. We'll keep in touch with you and the rest of future volunteers and other interested people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Judith. For the sake of time, I think we will need to close, but we really appreciate everybody joining us this morning. The next slide will kind of share with you some information about how to contact us in case you have any other questions. So on behalf of the Grameen Foundation's Farmer to Farmer program, thank you so much for joining us today. Stay tuned for more updates and information about our next webinar. Again, the recording will be available and can be sent to you in the next days. For information about the available projects, you can visit bankerswithoutborders.com volunteer. And you can also shoot us an email anytime at gf_f2f@grameenfoundation.org. And you can also visit us on Facebook by typing in fb.com/GrameenBWB. We hope you have a great rest of your day and evening for those of you who are joining us from abroad. And again, thank you so much for this great experience, and we look forward to continuing this conversation. Thank you so much, and I hope you guys have a great day.
Great. Thanks, everyone.